Okay, I didn't receive the memo as to what we were going to talk about today. So much of it is going to be improvisational. But thanks to Pratibha, I'm that student who's coming to an exam and it's the wrong day. So now that Pratibha has actually said that these are the topics that one has to cover, it makes sense to me. So I'll start with an anecdote. And also because this gorgeous woman sitting next to me is responsible for shaping my idea or my thinking as a woman practitioner, as a feminist. So I'm so grateful that I'm here today and I have been asked to share a stage with her. Very grateful for that. And also very grateful that this is probably one of the first, if not one of the very, very few panels where I'm not the only woman speaking. So it's really fantastic to be here with all these remarkable women. In terms of just a quick thing that I want to start off with is, as I said, I have a couple of anecdotes. The first one is of my first film that I ever did. It was with Girish Karnad, and I adore him. He's a beautiful man. But there was this first scene I had to do, okay, where I had an entry, and there was the love of my life who was going to come in, and I had a moment of blushing to do, okay. So this was a film which had really, spectacular actresses and theatre people, a lot of theatre people in that production. So all of us were standing there, and Girish, he's really he was like a performer. He was really a guy who liked to perform and have a conversation with everybody there. So he performed what it was to blush. And there was all of us women, 7, 8 of us standing there, looking at him with great curiosity and saying, "Really? Is that how it looks?" So at that time, that's what was happening in my mind. Really, is that what it looks like? But then over the years, I've sort of slotted it away to think about how women representation happens and who shapes that representation. So I'm just going to continue with a few more of these anecdotes that will probably offer a schema of what I'm going to talk about today, okay? And I am making it up as I go along, so if I lose the train of my thoughts, just help me out there. So the second incident is actually a curious creature, and please understand that when I say this, I have to say that the male feminist is someone we really, really invite, because we can't do this alone. We have to do it together, right? But there is a specific kind of male feminist that I'm puzzled by. And that male feminist is usually a person who is very well read, erudite, very free thinking, and who's made a judge in a kind of a writing competition, and who picks another male feminist who's writing about women and awards him the first prize. So that's the second curious category in this world of theatre for me, in terms of how we look at gender and how we look at representation and what it feels to me as a woman. So that's the second anecdote I have for you. And the third one is an anecdote of a transgender person, transgender actor identified as a woman, who was part of a performance that we had in Bangalore. And towards the end of the show, we had a kind of like a green room party, and everybody was invited to dance. And guess what? It was a green room party, so there was some Bollywood music playing there. And so as part of that, celebration, the director came in and she said, "Listen, why don't we just switch around? And, why don't the boys play the female parts, and why don't the girls play the male parts?" And there was everybody, some 20 of us, dancing around. And at that moment, this transgender actor came forward and actually stopped us from dancing and said, "No, that's not how it's done. all the boys stand this side, and these are the steps you will perform. And you girls will stand this side, and these are the steps you will perform. And there I was looking at that moment, and I was saying, how do we talk about gender fluidity in this moment? So that is another moment I wanted to just hold in your head. And believe me, I do have a point to make, okay? They're all diverse, kind of various points that I'm plotting somewhere over there. The last category is another curious one, okay? It's the female patriarch, okay? Now, bear with me, we do need, women leaders, and we have plenty of them, and they're changing the meaning of what it means to be leaders, per se, okay? But there is this curious category that will stand in the field, especially in theatre, many times, will stand in theatre and have a whole bunch of remarkable people who are working in the theatre, making waves, pushing boundaries, writing stuff, creating new work, changing status quo. And there will be this woman who will go up and say, "Nammalli hengsre illa, writers illa, directors illa, stories illa." So I have a feeling that there is a master narrative there that is being reinforced and being retold back to us about a dearth of women workers in the theatre. Okay, so these are 4 categories that have somewhat shaped my thinking. And I say this in a kind of a light way, but not at all to take away or distract from all the issues that people on the spectrum of the gender identity have to face, when you go into a workspace, and especially one like theatre or performance, So, not to take away from that. But, so having said this, and the speakers before me have talked about their own journeys and the things that they've had to do to overcome these situations, whether it is something like not having a toilet, or not being able to nurse inside a rehearsal room or whatever it is. But the thing that has always been curious for me is, what are the ways forward? What are we thinking about in terms of how do we want to shape the future? How do we want to shape the space that we work in, that we do inhabit as well? So as I've been thinking and listening to all the other speakers, and I've been mulling over what to offer a bunch of young people who are here learning about acting, learning about the theatre, what is it that you can possibly go back thinking about? And, I have about 3 ideas that I want to drop in the room. There are no easy answers at all. It is messy. It has always been messy. There are no direct answers. There are no direct ways of finding a solution that works for everybody. So I don't aspire many times for equality, because I find that is a flattening out, and that equal opportunities don't necessarily lead to equal outcomes or the same outcomes. So I think my ambition is really to plant the idea of equity again in theatre, is to look at individual situations, to look at individual needs, to look at each groups locally, and to see what is that one thing that is needed in that situation that can possibly change it for a whole bunch of people. Okay? So along those lines, if at one end there is status quo, all these anecdotes that I gave you of the director telling you what it looks like to be feminine, and all the various things that I talked about, I think there is an idea of what ought to be, or what is how something is defined, whether it is theatre or whether it is womanhood, whether it is feminism, whether it is gender fluidity or gender specificity, whatever it may be. There is something that wants to hold status quo. So the question always is, who is benefiting from that status quo, and who is wanting to retain that status quo. Okay? So in response to that, or to challenge that, there are these 3 sort of ideas that I want to offer you. And those ideas are, leadership, and I would completely declare that these are ideals, but I do want to start from there. So there is leadership, there is the idea of empathy, and the last one is the idea of courage. And I think in all the ladies who have spoken thus far, they've all touched upon it from their own experiences, and you will connect the dots in all that we've spoken together. But here's the offering. So I wear many hats, it's not something that I set out to do, it's something I had to do because somebody else was not willing to do it. Okay, so I wore many hats. So I run a theatre company, I direct, many times I design, stuff that I didn't actually want to do or, it was just something that it needed to be done and I did it, right? So there was design. I, of course, act. I also write now. I'm also a producer. So so for me, the work in the theatre sort of spans along these three ideas of leadership, empathy, and courage. And if I were to look at the roles or the hats that I have worn, then I would think that there is the role of the director, there is the role of the actor, not necessarily an actor who's performing a professional play or anything, but more an actor who is in training, like yourselves, many of you who are here, okay, an actor who's in training. And the third category is the artist in society. So I'm going to try and see if I can map these ideas together, stitch them all together to make something cohesive out of this conversation I'm having with you, okay? So, most of my acting life, I'm a trained actor, and most of my acting life has been spent playing out the fantasy of a male idea of what it means to be a woman, okay? And I've done it quite willingly. But the first quarrel I ever had with that was with my very wonderful teacher, Prasad. And this is why my relationship with him is also so precious, because it allows for that debate. It allows for you to disagree, and that doesn't have to mean a falling out. It doesn't have to mean a separating out, but it does mean that there is room there for you to air what you think and what you believe in and take actions based on that. So as a director, there is a space that one holds, and the rehearsal room is where an actor may be not as empowered or equipped to make decisions about her own representation, and the rehearsal room is inherently somewhat pyramidal in its structure, with the director at the apex. And if it's not the director, then it will be the writer. And the agency, let's say, of the performer or the actor may not be something that is in conversation quite as much as it ought to be. Okay? So as a director, for me, I think the most educative experience has been working with. Also, I learned from a lot of, I've been very lucky. I've had fantastic women teachers who've influenced my life, my thinking, and the ladies here are no exception to that. Was this idea of collaboration in the rehearsal room, where there was a concerted effort to collapse the pyramid to something flatter, where there was co-authorship. And there was a conversation about a sensibility that we all wanted to embrace in order to shape a piece of art or a piece of theatre, So that, to me, is something that I offer back to the younger generation, or all you theatre makers who will go back and look into your rehearsal room and see what aspect of it can you collapse to flatten it out a little more. It could be anything, It could be who makes the decision as far as the money is concerned, who decides how representation happens, who decides whose story is being told. And that is something that, and it's going to be different because what my experience of what I do in Bangalore or somewhere else is always going to be different from the next person's experience. But the thing is to begin to recognize what is it that is held as status quo and how can you challenge it? How can you challenge it in the rehearsal room if you are the leader? If you're holding the space, if you are the director, how can you flatten it out for other people to collaborate as well? So there's something, I suppose it comes from also my very traditional training. So when we went into the rehearsal room, along with the director, the designers would all be there, the actors would all be there. So all the 8 weeks of work where the play was being built, everybody was required to be in the room. Unlike when you go into a professional space, there is the director who has to work with the designers and all your technicians and all your crew, whereas the actors will come only for the rehearsal time. And then the designers will arrive 1 week before the show, if you're lucky. And then they will give you a design, and then therefore that's how. So this collaborative way of working is something that I find allows us to share authorship. It's not like we are, taking away the credentials of what somebody has done. It's not like that. But it is an acknowledgement that a piece of theatre is not possible. It's not possible without the presence of all the people who were in the room. And they may have contributed very specifically with things. Or sometimes they may have just inhabited that space by just being there. And that would have influenced you. So that a sense of a kind of a softer focus on what it means to create together, to co-create, is one thing that I feel has been my experience as a director, and I would like to offer that as a way of thinking or making theatre for, possibly in the ways that you go forward. That's one. The second is as an actor, especially as an actor in training, and as I said, I've declared my very traditional actor training that I've had, which was in National School of Drama, and then again in another country, which was about performance making. Also, now I'm deeply interested in pedagogy. I'm very interested in actor training, and I go back to institutions that I have learned from. I go back to various other institutions where actor training happens, and I notice that it is a top-down structure there as well. There is, for example, I've made huge noises about this because I go back to NSD to teach. It's my alma mater, but I have a lot of problems with the way with what the situation is over there and the leadership in general, right? So. But the point I'm trying to make is that this structure of training, the structure of education, remains top-down without a sort of a pushback, without even the notion that you have the autonomy to shape your own learning. You are being taught, and therefore there has to be some engagement of your own in that training process. For example, for a training process, an actor not to know what is the schema of the curation of the teachers who have come to teach me in these 3 years or this 2 years or this 1 year that I've completely dedicated to train myself as an actor. How is it that I have no say in that curation? How is it that's possible? Or how is it that I cannot in any way influence it? Not for myself, let's say, even for the next batch or the next generation of people. How is it that I have absolutely no? So that's something that I've always thought about in terms of actor training, which I want to offer back is, I think it's the state of education also, and we love the idea of the guru telling us what to do. How can that possibly be wrong? But there is a lot wrong with that, right? There is a degree of flattening there as well. There is a caste system there too, that one needs to acknowledge. and beautifully said, it has to be shattered if something new has to come and take its place, and that something has to be thought about, that it is your learning experience and that you have something to do with it. So that's one part of actor training, and another part is, of course, something to do with the thing that I'm most interested in. I teach voice, and for me, actor training really comes together in voice. It's my bias and I declare it. But the thing is that actor training all over the world, in academia, in conservatories, in any kind of private dramas, whatever you may think of, is taught in silos, right? Is taught in silos, like the body is trained, and then the voice is trained, and then imagination is trained, and then there is script work, which is so sacred, right? So there are these hierarchies even there. But the thing is, in the actor's body, separate it out and show me. Show me, okay? But the thing, that's the fact that these things come together. And on stage, of course, in a different medium, there is technology which does quite a bit of the work, and we won't go there today. But on stage, the actor's tools are just this. There's the body, there's the imagination, and there's the voice. And the text has to be expressed via that. And that has to come together in training. This is something that is a longer project and something that I'm very interested in. And wherever I go, I talk about it. And as part of actor training, the thing that comes alongside, and I will struggle here a little bit, is the idea of the actor's well-being. And I say this because, there has been too much emphasis on how acting is taught, and how it is taught top down, that the actor's body is always at the mercy of the person who's teaching that body. That body will tell you, your voice is not okay, your body is not okay, the way you're projecting is not okay, the way you look is not okay. All right? So there is this sense of having to take that criticism, that feedback all the time from the people who teach you, But where is the facility for you to take care of your psyche, your body, your emotional life, your emotional health, your mental health? Where is that component in actor training? And for me, that idea of care, that idea of holding the actor through training, which is inherently traumatic, how does one think about that? And for me, that is a softer idea. I don't categorize it as male or female or feminine or masculine, but it's a softer idea about training, and it's not entirely focused on excellence only. So, and that it's not the only virtue there is, if that makes sense. Okay, so those are the two things that I want to place before you about actor training from a woman's perspective. And the last one is, and that's where I think the idea of empathy sits. So just to close that for me, and of course I'm opening these ideas out for you to also question and come back. And the last category for me, and I will close very quickly, is the idea of courage, of being an artist in society, and that you are constantly going to be butting heads with status quo, no matter where you take yourself, whether you take it into a different media or you stay in theatre, whatever you do as an artist, you will hit the wall of status quo. So what is it? What are the tools that you have in your hands that help you think about your voice as an artist? Think about yourself as someone who is willing to take risks, set her own boundaries, first of all, so she's not abused or, is not taken advantage of, but also is willing to push the boundaries that are there. you know. So on that note, I think the idea of creating, when you become an independent artist and you walk into a rehearsal room, let's say it's a professional theatre space where there's rehearsals, or it's a semi-professional, or it's an amateur space, it doesn't matter. But if you are an artist by that time, which means you have done some work and you have your own sense and a sensibility of how you want to work, then it becomes your responsibility to make sure that the space is made safe for others as well. If you find somebody being used, abused, manipulated, bullied, then is there something you can do about it? Women have a very, actually it's not fair for me to say women, all human beings have this. If you have ever been bullied, you'll find that your eyes will seek out a person to check if somebody was watching, if you had a witness. Isn't that right? You would do that, right? So, I invite you that if you walk into a room and you see something like that happening, can you offer eyes? Can you be witness? And so can you empower that other person and create a safer space to work for another person? And on the backs of that, I'm going to ask if it is possible then to move that safe space into a brave space, is then to challenge all the people who said this is what theatre is meant to be. And say, oh, really? And step over it and see what happens. Yes, it is a risk. Yes, it may not always work. It hasn't for me. I've been around for now 25 years. Hell, I know. So, but the thing is, it's been really, really worth it. You know, the very small example, and I feel a lot of joy and a lot of pride with that, is that during the pandemic, almost everybody told me what a bad idea it was for me to do a solo performance that was digital. But the thing is, it was something that called me. It was something that I felt I wanted to push a status quo of what everybody was telling me, that what theatre is meant to be. Okay? It was just that. It is a rebellion. It is something that says, I'm going to try it. So I might burn my hands, big deal, but I will try it. And here's the thing. The discovery of that moment is that I never saw it any different from a person who usually works in a kind of a realistic space. Or let's say somebody does musical theatre, okay? And chooses and says, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to do physical theatre. And includes dance in it. And there I was, I said, there's my theatre. I want to connect with an audience that's not present. I don't have an auditorium. I don't have a stage. I want to perform. So what can I do? So I included a camera in. Why is that different? And why should that not be thought of as theatre? What about it is not live? I was very much alive in it. And so was everybody else who was watching it on the other side. So there, I mean, this is my personal, thing. But I'm just saying that as an artist in society, you will meet resistance and embrace it. Because every resistance that comes to you from society, for an artist, it's a gold mine. Just use it and make the most of it, you know. So, I think I'm all talked out, and I'm very grateful for you all to listen to me. Thank you very much. And,